in the fall to start doing a podcast, and I'm very intrigued by that whole phenomena. I just think people love it.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you this, that a lot of times the Zoom thing does actually work. If we can do your podcast for you, record it, edit it, put your intros and outros to it, and put it back out through our system, and then email it so that you if you want have another system that you want to use also, you have a copy for that also. And it's real easy for me to do this. So I've been doing radio for about maybe 9 years now. So.
Wow. Okay. Well, when I get to that point, I'll have to talk to you about that, because that would be great.
Yeah. Okay. I just need to bring my microphone closer to me so I sound a little get better levels for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So how it essentially works is you just bring me in on a conference call, or on again on that Zoom call thing, and I can record the whole thing. And I don't even have to talk. All I have to do is record, and then I clean everything up for you. Pretty easy.
Nice. Okay, I will remember that. I have my son is going to school in communications, and mostly though he's been in film and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so he's actually on a mission for a church, and he's going to be done with that in August. And I do a weekly blog called Freaky Friday. And so he said, "Oh, Mom, you need to record those, and we could do a podcast." But then he's going off to school in the fall. So we're going to kind of experiment. But it seems like what you have to offer might be that really nice next step once he's off to school and I have to do this by myself.
Yeah.
So, that's a great option.
Does he do music and everything? And because what I'm going to tell you is because you want to keep things consistent, right? So if if you guys find a music together that you like, just he'll know how to record it, and then make sure all the levels are clean, everything from what it sounds like he does, and you just share that with me, and I'll make sure that I just keep it on my system, set aside in the Terri Reid file that so no one else actually gets it. So yeah.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
It's a pretty neat thing that I came across doing this. I used to do radio in the U.S. also, down in Arizona, and I mean in those days it was like everything was like really complicated. There's no way you could ever have it in your home, and
right
with all these new softwares and everything, the digital age, it's like this is amazing stuff. It's like, wow, I have a whole radio station in my house. So yeah.
Nice.
So yeah. Okay, so I have notes in front of me. And it is Terri Reid, right? Not.
That's correct. Reid, right?
Okay. Make sure I have a bad habit of pronouncing things the wrong way. I love paranormal, though. That's awesome stuff.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay, so all our sound levels are set, so when you're ready, we can get started.
Okay, ready to go.
All right. So we'll start then. And welcome back, everybody. I'm here today with Terri Reid. Terri published her first book, Loose Ends, a Mary O'Reilly paranormal mystery, in August of 2010. By the end of 2013, Loose Ends had sold over 200,000 copies. She has 19 other books in the Mary O'Reilly series, and more than 10 other novels, as well as a number of short stories and novelettes. Terri has enjoyed the top-rated and hot new release status in the women's sleuths and paranormal romance category through Amazon US. So, well, welcome to the show, Terri.
Thank you.
I love paranormal books. I'm a big fan of Nora Roberts. Because
yes,
the future stuff too, and paranormal mysteries and everything. I love ghost stories. So
exactly, aren't they fun? Yes, yeah. I agree.
They're a lot of fun. So, how did you get started with this?
Well, I've so kind of two different branches combined in one. I've always loved to read and also to write, and I think I wrote my first book when I was in second grade. You know, I've always loved that idea of being an author. And my background, I'm Celtic. I'm Irish and Scottish, and in our family, telling ghost stories was like sitting around, just sitting around the kitchen table at dinner time. That was just part of the conversation. And so I grew up hearing great ghost stories and telling ghost stories. And then I was a freelance journalist for a number of years. And as a freelance journalist, I had to pitch my own ideas to the newspapers I wrote for. And I was writing for a small local newspaper, and I grew up in Chicago, and Chicago's got great ghost stories. And I was pitching to the editor of this small local newspaper, and we were called stringers because they took a string and they measured the length of your column, and you got paid by the inch, and that's why they called us stringers. And so you wanted to pitch an idea that was long. It was a big idea. And so I pitched this idea to do the ghost stories for a Halloween feature. And the editor looked at me and said, "There are no ghost stories." And it was in Freeport, Illinois. And I said, "If I can go out and find ghost stories, will you let me do this article?" And he said, "Well, sure." And it was the crazy lady that was, standing in the checkout line at the supermarket asking the cashier if she knew of any ghost stories. And I started to get ghost stories, but not what I thought I would get. I thought I would get like the Resurrection Mary stories, the legends. Mm-hmm. But instead, these people started telling me about ghosts that were actually in their homes and their personal experiences with ghosts. And that just opened up a whole different world to me of these people who were living with ghosts and had personal experiences with ghosts. And so I had the feature in our local paper for the next 3 or 4 years because there were so many ghost stories out there. And then I decided, my sister told me a ghost story that had happened to her, and that was kind of the basis for the first Mary O'Reilly book. So I've loved ghost stories for a long time.
Wow. Okay, so you're in Chicago, Illinois, or near Chicago, Illinois, right?
Right.
Any, like, gangster or Al Capone stories? I gotta ask that question.
Oh, yes, yeah. Well, and it's funny because the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago is one of the most haunted hotels in the United States, and there's gangsters in that hotel, and in one of the Mary O'Reilly books, actually in the second one, Good Tidings, Mary O'Reilly ends up going to Chicago to help her brother, who's still a Chicago cop, and he gets her a room in the Congress Hotel, and she has a paranormal experience with a gangster in her room. And so, but yeah, that's supposed to be very haunted. And the area where the St. Valentine's Day massacre occurred, there's a garage there. That's supposed to be very haunted. The biggest story, though, from Chicago is Resurrection Mary. And that's the story of a woman who went dancing with her boyfriend, like in the 20s or 30s, and and I guess they had an argument, and it was a winter's day, and she left the ballroom. It was on Archer Avenue, which is not far from Resurrection Cemetery. And while she was crossing the road, she was hit by a car. And to this day, people see this woman walking down Archer Avenue dressed in an old-fashioned ball gown. And the coolest thing is cab drivers have picked her up. And the cemetery, Resurrection Cemetery, is huge. It's like at least a mile long. And so they pick her up at one end, and by the time they reach the other end of the cemetery, there's nobody in the cab with them. And I remember growing up and listening to WGN radio, a Chicago radio station, and they would always have cab drivers call in on Halloween and tell about their experiences with Resurrection Mary. So good stories from Chicago.
You know what? Now that you said that, I have heard that some of those stories that about the cab drivers picking up this lady, and then she's no longer there. They thought they had a fare and didn't. Yeah. Right.
There's actually recently I heard an interview, and it was from the son of a Chicago cop, and he said that his dad came home and he was really shaken. And this man is now, the son is now an adult, but he says he still remembers the day his dad came in and he was white. And, they all gathered around him and said, "What's wrong?" And he had picked up Resurrection Mary, and she had disappeared from the squad car. So, yeah, to me that lends a little bit more credence than the cab drivers when you have a police officer who had that experience. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, a police officer, because you would think the training stuff like that would make it so that you would know more about what you're seeing, right?
Exactly, right. They're trained to observe things like that. They're trained to look for certain things and to observe reality, I would guess, and yeah, he picked up this woman who he thought was lost, or, and she gave him an address, and supposedly when they checked that address, it is the old address of this woman who was killed all those years ago.
So the address pretty much always it's still standing or still exists.
Yeah. I think I want to say, and I could be. It's in one of the south suburbs, so not far from Archer Avenue and Resurrection Cemetery. But the people who own it now are not relatives of the woman who died.
Yeah. Huh. That is a very interesting story, and it makes you wonder about more the why did she decide she was leaving, and what was the fight about, and all that sort of stuff. Things that we will probably just never know that has made her energy stay.
Right. Oh, and that whole idea of when people are killed quickly, and do they not know that they're dead? So they keep going through those same, and there's lots of stories, especially, unfortunately, children who were hit by cars. There's lots of stories about them just reappearing, playing out on the same street, because it came so quickly, they just didn't realize that they were dead now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that also is an interesting thing, because children have to learn what death is. So if they die too young or something like that, does their energy reoccur because they just never learned the concept of death? Right.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah. It's very interesting to me I've gone to several, been invited to several paranormal conferences, which is kind of fun because, usually as a writer, a fiction writer, you're not perceived at all as an expert in the field, but there's something about ghosts, that it's okay, you're still an expert. And so gone to these paranormal conferences and talked about ghost stories, and the idea of why do people want to hear ghost stories? And I think a part of it is that reassurance that there's life after death, that, it's not like your being sizzles out once you die. And so I think that's reassuring, but I think even more so, and I think the reason all of these shows on TV are so popular, all these ghost story shows, is because most of us have had experiences.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes us feel like, well, maybe we're not crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe we did see that. It reassures us that, yeah, there was something there.
Maybe there's somebody else that believes it too, right?
Right. Exactly.
Okay, you've made Resurrection Mary sound so familiar. Is that one of your favorite ghost stories, or is there another one that's actually more favorite than that one?
Okay, so my favorite ghost story that was told to me, and I always tell it when I'm out speaking, is I was telling ghost stories at our local historical society has a one-room schoolhouse, and at Halloween time they put together this whole program, and they invite me in to tell ghost stories. And I'll tell a couple ghost stories, and then I ask people in the audience to tell a story too. And so this was, I want to say, like 15 or 20 years ago, but this woman stood up, and she was, a grandma, just a regular grandma kind of person, and she explained that she had just come back from visiting her daughter, her son-in-law, and her grandkids who lived in Pennsylvania. And they lived in a really old house in Pennsylvania. And for those of us in the Midwest, we have old houses, but they're nothing like some of the houses that are in the New England area. Those are really old houses. And she said that they had finished dinner and they had moved to the adjoining living room parlor to just sit and relax and visit. And the lights had been turned off in the dining room, but from her vantage point in her chair, she could still see into the dining room. And she said as they were talking, a motion kind of caught the corner of her eye, and she turned, and she saw this little boy dressed in old-fashioned clothing just float through the dining room and disappear into the wall. And she said the look of surprise must have shown on her face, because her 4-year-old grandson came over to her and took her by the hand and patted her hand gently and said, "Don't worry, Grandma, that's just the attic people." So I loved that story because it was so innocent and yet so creepy. Who else is up in the attic?
Yeah, really. Who else is an attic? I do know that on the East Coast, that like in Pennsylvania, that in the Philadelphia area, that you could have a house that's been there for 400-500 years.
Right.
Since the William Penn actually started the whole colony, there you could still have a house sitting there that's that old. So it's kind of weird that
exactly.
way. Exactly.
Yes, yeah. Well, and our house, it's about 150 years old, and it's an old farmhouse. And we have 2 ghosts that are in our house. And one we've been able to pinpoint, and she was the wife of the man who built the house 150 years ago. And my children, when they were small, we had a lot more activity in the house when they were small. So I just kind of always pictured her as another mom, just checking on the kids, because this is where she raised her kids, and so she just comes and visits and checks on my kids too. But one time, my son was in the varsity choir at high school, and the girls in the choir decided to drive out. And we live in the country. We have about 5 acres, and we have huge oak trees that surround our house. Mm-hmm. And the girls from the varsity choir decided to come out and TP the trees. Are you familiar with the whole TPing?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right.
They TP houses here in the little town I'm in White Rock, BC. Yeah.
Okay. So we had never because we're like 10 miles out of town, and so we've never been TP before, and so we woke up Sunday morning, and there's rolls of toilet paper wafting from our huge oak trees, and I actually thought it was pretty cool. It's like, whoa, look what they did. And my son went to school then on Monday. And the girls approached him and said, so what'd you think of what we did? And he, kind of embarrassedly admitted, well, my mom actually kind of liked it. She's so weird. And then the girls said, well, why didn't your mom come out and say hi to us? And, they came at about, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And he said, well, my mom was asleep. And they said, no, we saw her. And he said, what? And he said, she was standing in the kitchen window. She watched us the entire time we TP'd the house. And that's that back corner that we have 2 staircases, and one goes from the kitchen up to the back area of the house, and one's in the front of the house. And whenever we had seen this ghost, she had always been in the back of the house in that area. And David said to them, oh, that wasn't my mom you saw. That was our ghost. And so we've never been TP'd since. That's kind of disappointing. But it was interesting to have all of these girls claim they saw a woman standing in the window of the darkened kitchen and watching them the entire time they TP'd. So kind of comforting that we've got someone watching out for us. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Wow. So it sounds like you find amazing stories and to have one in your own house. So, wow. I was going to ask you. It's like, do you believe in ghosts? But I guess that answers that question right off.
Okay. Well, it's hard to not believe when that, and we'll smell her perfume. We'll all be sitting in the living room together, and all of a sudden, this really bad. I shouldn't say that. This really powerful floral perfume will be in the room with us. And it's like, oh, well, she's just walked through, or we're all downstairs and we can hear footsteps on the second floor. And so it's really hard to deny something that, we've had proof of so many times. So yes, I do believe in ghosts.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of tough not to believe in ghosts after.
Yeah, right.
That, right? Yeah. I had to say I would have to hunt high and low for this area to find ghost stories like that. I think there's been like a couple of, because you go north of Vancouver and you find like mining towns and stuff like that. I think maybe they would have the ghost stories, but there's not that many. People don't talk about the ghost stories here that much. It was like, so, which leads me to I mean, you did this brave thing as a stringer, and I finally get the term stringer now. I've heard it on TV a few times. And I never quite got it before until you explained the whole string. But to go out and just ask people, it's like, hey, do you have any ghost stories? It's like, wow, that's just a really brave thing to do. Which I did realize that when looking at your books and the rest of your social media and everything, that you're independently published.
Yes.
So how does that work out for you?
It's interesting. I love it personally. I love it, and I was really lucky to have my books come out in 2010, because that was just kind of when Kindle exploded. Because in what was it? Was it 2011 or 2012 is when the Kindle Fire came out, and everybody had to have one, and so they had to buy all these books, and so at that time you didn't have 18 million people who knew that they could be an author and all writing for Amazon. At that time, there weren't that many of us. And my sister was traditionally published, and she is a great writer. And with it, well, there's a couple of things. First of all, when I started, I had owned my own public relations and marketing company, and it was in 2010, and the market did a little shift, and a lot of my clients ended up losing a lot of their investments, and my clients were small businesses, and so suddenly I had nobody as clients, and I had to do something, to make the mortgage payments and things like that. And so I had been working on this on loose ends, and now, unfortunately, I had plenty of time to finish it. And I'd even contacted my sister's agent and said, I've got this story, but for a traditionally published book, you first find an agent, and that can take months, years, and then the agent starts pitching it, and again, that can take months or years, and then they give you, an advance, and nowadays, unless you're, Nora Roberts or Stephen King or one of those guys, advances are not a whole lot of money, and then you start getting royalties, and I needed, because I was trying to replace a full-time job, I needed something different. And so a friend of mine sent me an article, a Wall Street Journal article, about this brand new phenomena, called ebooks and Kindle publishing. And there was a woman in it. Her name was Karen McQuestion, and she was a journalist, and she was up in Wisconsin, and she had written these books and had done the whole try to find an agent, try to find a publisher. And even with her experience in journalism, she kept getting knocked down. She couldn't find it. And so she finally went the independent publishing way. And they were celebrating that she had sold 30,000 copies. That was, it was huge. And so I emailed her, and she was kind enough to respond to me and say, oh, yeah, this is a really viable way to publish your book. And so I thought, well, what the heck? It wasn't anything to do with creativity, or it was kind of, how am I going to get my royalties as quickly as I possibly can at that point, And so I put my book out, and the first month it sold like 100 copies. The second month it was 200, and I put it out in August, and by December it was selling like 1,000 copies a month. And by that time I had put the second book, Good Tidings, out. What I love about it is I own everything, because if I had gone through a traditional publisher, Loose Ends would have probably, had a run of 20,000, 25,000 books, and then it would have died, because they get to own it. I can't say, oh no, really, more people will buy it. And maybe it wouldn't have died now because traditional publishers are doing ebooks. But they not only own my book, they own my characters. So if it didn't do well, and I wanted to write a second book and publish it on my own, I couldn't do that until my contract ended, in like 7 to 10 years. And so I love, 30-some books later, and novellas and short stories. In a month, I was earning more than my sister earned with a whole book, through the whole process of writing the book and the royalties, and it just made sense. So, but there's pitfalls. I mean, some people think they can just slap together stuff and throw it out there, and reviews are either your best friend or your worst enemy, because people are going to be honest. And now I think before people buy things, they check the reviews. And if you slap something together, you only get one chance at a first impression. Yeah. And people aren't going to buy your next book. So there's a wonderful part about being able to have that freedom, but it can also be dangerous if you're not careful and aren't treating it like a profession.
Yeah. Well, a lot of our listeners are small business owners, and they're not writing the book for the novel of it. So I advise them on a formula that gets them to answer a bunch of questions that their prospective clients would want. So in what it sounds like you've done exactly what I usually tell people to do, is that you found the audience that wanted those stories. They wanted Mary O'Reilly, right, and you provided them with it, and that's why you sold so many copies.
Well, and it was interesting. After I'd sold about 60,000 copies, I was contacted by a New York literary agent, and he wanted to represent me. Mm-hmm. And so I signed a contract for a year, and I said, yeah, you can sell the print rights. I didn't want him to sell the e-rights because I was doing okay without sharing 20%. And I said, go ahead and, see what you can do. Well, so the Mary O'Reilly stories, at that time, in 2010, paranormal books were all about vampires and werewolves. And, and nobody wanted to talk about ghosts. And so, traditional publishers have that same kind of writer's guidelines that magazines do. They talk about the editorial guidelines, and they want one of these books and one of these books, and so I didn't fit there. And then my story, a lot of the paranormal romances at that time were almost erotic. They were very sexual. And Mary O'Reilly has a sweet romance in it, but it's not sexual at all. It's more about family and small towns and loyalty, and then ghosts mixed into the flavor. And so they didn't like that either. And so he tried all of the major publishing houses, and nobody wanted to print Mary O'Reilly. And so here I am. As I said, I've finished the series at book 20, and my readers wanted, so I had to start a new series about Mary O'Reilly because my readers wanted me to continue. But I'm still selling, I don't know the numbers, thousands of books every month in the Mary O'Reilly series, from a series that the traditional publishers said wouldn't work, or people wouldn't want. And they did, but it just didn't fit their editorial calendars. So,
right.
I think that's it too. You're exactly right. I found a niche. I found people who wanted to hear ghost stories and who wanted to be able. When I do signings, I'll have 3 generations come in, and it's a mom and her daughter. And they all can read my book. And they all, and the mom doesn't mind giving it to her 14-year-old daughter to read because there's nothing, objectionable to that mom. And the grandmother reads it too. And I love that. I love that it can be shared intergenerationally.
Yeah. Well, some of the things, going back to to one of my favorite series of books to read and in print, not the ebooks. When you, granted, I love the fact that they're a husband and wife. The love scene is a husband and wife sort of thing, but
right.
Some of the ways that they talk about sex, I don't exactly think I would want my 14-year-old reading that.
Exactly, right?
It's like, there's the hugs, the kisses, and all that sort of stuff. That's all nice, fine for a 14-year-old. But when somebody starts talking about other areas of anatomy, maybe not so much. Let's put the brakes on that one for a second.
And,
right?
Right. And I think I have good friends who write things that are not things that I write, but I'm proud of them for what they're doing. So I don't have a problem with people writing what they want to write. I just know what I'm comfortable with and what I want my stories to be. And you're right. There's some things that you don't want to share with a 14-year-old just because you don't want the question. What does this mean? And for me, it didn't fit my story.
Right.
It didn't fit my character. And that's important too. But for a lot, for a traditional publisher, they're looking for something that's sexy because that's what their group of readers wants.
Well,
and
yeah,
so,
there's a different audience than yours.
Exactly.
So, okay. So I'm just going to ask this because you were formerly a PR and marketing person. What does your audience actually look like?
It's interesting. My demographic kind of runs from teenagers, but not a huge amount. I think my biggest demographic is probably women from 40 to 65. But surprisingly, and I don't know why I'm surprised, but I have a huge gay following, which I love. And I'm taking these demographics from my Facebook because Amazon does not share demographic information. So I have my personal Facebook page. I have a Terri Reid, author of the Mary O'Reilly Paranormal Mystery series, page. But anyway, from my Facebook pages, I get my demographics from that. So I have women from 40 to 65 is the major, but I have women that are older than that. I have women that are younger. I have a lot of men, and I have a lot of gay men who love my books. So I guess maybe I don't have a specific demographic. I think the idea of ghost stories is intriguing to everybody, but I think it's small town America is also kind of what I write about, and family and relationships, and so it's just kind of an interesting demographic. I wouldn't have guessed it when I went into it, but I love it. I get emails all of the time from people all over the world, and they tell me their ghost stories, and I think that maybe that's the common thread that we all have, is we have that love for something a little bit out of the ordinary, that sixth sense love. So it's kind of fun.
So as like advice to somebody who is actually looking to write novels, do you have any best advice for them to where they should actually start?
Oh, yes. So first of all, obviously a good story, and you would think that would be a given. But so many people think that if they just get the first one out and get their name out there, then the next one can be better. And it's going back to that. You only get one chance to make a good first impression. So make sure you have somebody. You can't edit your own work because you read what you think you wrote. And so you need to have an editor. And you need to not have your mom edit it because she thinks you're brilliant anyway. So she's not gonna criticize you. So so get somebody who is excellent at editing and who will say, wait, when I read this I got confused, or whoa, this doesn't seem like your character should be doing this, or this is too cheesy. Your readers aren't gonna. Somebody who's gonna be brutally honest, because you want that person to be brutally honest when you can change things, rather than the Amazon reviewers to be brutally honest, because at that point it's out there and you've missed that opportunity. So make sure you have a really good product. The second thing is they used to say you can't tell a book by its cover, but unfortunately when people are shopping at Amazon or any online, and my books are in print because Amazon has that ability to print on demand and Audible. But when people are shopping now, a cover is the first thing that they see. And a cover really does now represent your book. So you can't use word art. You know, you can't buy stock photo and use word art and have people take you seriously because people can tell. And so if you don't have, you know, I had a background in creating ads. And so I've done my Mary O'Reilly's, I did them. But when I did my Order of Bridget Cross, when I did the Order of Bridget's Cross, it was kind of a urban fantasy. And so I hired an illustrator to do that because I knew that was out of my league. And so hire somebody to do a cover for you. There's people out there now. There's a forum, I want to say it's called like Kindle World's Forum or something like that. And people who do covers advertise. And so get a good cover, you know, because again, it's going to sell your book. What else? Make sure that when you publish your first book, either you have a series, or you have a book ready to publish soon after that, because you know, if you think about your reading habits, if you find a book that you love, when you finish the book, you probably go online to find whatever else this author has written. And you'll buy it because you just love this first book. And if you go online and you see that they don't have anything, you might wait a month or 2 months or maybe 3 months. But once 6 months has passed, you've kind of forgotten about that author. And you've moved on to your next favorite author who hopefully has a couple books. And so really to make it in the world of independent publishing, you have to have books out there, I'd say every 3 or 4 months. They don't have to be long. You know, you can have a 55,000 word novel, but you need to make sure that there's something that somebody can pick up right away. And that's how you develop your following. Yeah. And so, you know, if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to push this out in October, but then it's going to take me to April to write this next book, well, then don't push it out in October. Wait till January. And then when people finish it, then they've got something else. And, you know, once somebody has read 2 or 3 or 4 of your books, then they know your name. Then they know what you've written, and then you become a habit to them. You know, so as an author, you've developed a following. So it can't be I've worked 6 years on this book and I'm going to push it out there, because it'll sink. You know, if you don't get a bunch of people to buy it, it'll sink. And that's the other nice thing about getting another book out there. So for me, when I put a new book out, it usually in the first week or so goes to bestseller. You know, and it's usually within paranormal romance or women's sleuth or something, it'll hit the top 10. And so people who have never heard of me before, and there's lots of them out there, they'll say, well, who's this person who's got, you know, top 10? And they'll probably click on Terri Reid because it's probably book 3 or book 10 or whatever. And so they see that it's, you know, top 10, so they go to Terri Reid, and then they find Loose Ends, the first book. And they see that, okay, well, this first book's got 1,500 reviews, and it's, you know, 4.5 stars at this point. I'm going to try it. And I've watched, when I put out a new book, all of my other books jump because my name is out there. And so, again, it's a marketing thing. It's like an end cap, but it's an Amazon end cap. So, you know, it's like, oh, who's she? And then all the other books pop up. And so I get a whole new influx of new readers.
Right.
So
that makes Amazon a pretty cool marketing tool for your writing that way.
Well, and, you know, and that's it. You know, I think here I am sitting, as I said, on 5 acres in the country, 2 hours northwest of Chicago, and I have people in Australia and in Germany and in England and in Ireland and in Canada, reading my books and commenting. And I think, had it not been for this great idea Amazon had, a lot of us would not have been able to become writers, because traditional publishing, they're only going to put out so many, and they're only going to pick what they want to pick within their editorial context. And so, 20 years ago, those were all of those, famous novels that ended up in file cabinets because they just didn't fit the mold.
Yeah, and that is very true. I was helping a friend market his books, and he wanted to do it he wanted to do a book tour, and he wanted to use Costco for his book tour. I was like, okay, well, let's see how this works out. So I called Costco, and they said that, one, they came up with some ridiculous number of books that he actually had to have, something like 30,000 books that he had to have, and that the book tour wouldn't extend past. British Columbia is a pretty big area, because most of the Canada, the provinces are much bigger than the states are. But
okay,
so he wasn't really going to get past, I say, a few hundred miles out from Vancouver, maybe 200 miles out, in a 200-mile radius around Vancouver, which also kind of incidentally did include part of, like, he could get almost to Seattle or something like that, and a Costco there. So he would have these book signings. But the really big hurdle was that he had to have that, I think it was like 30,000 books or something.
Wow. And you think about that.
Until he could prove that he had 30,000 books to be able to sell.
And the investment there. But, I've had book signings where in a local bookstore, we have Book World down here. And I had a book signing at our local Book World, and I had 40 people come in and buy books. And the Book World person told me that was huge for them. That was the biggest book signing they had ever had. And they kept inviting me back every year when it was National Small Book Shop Week or something like that, because I would bring in what they called the crowds. But if you're, and I know Costco is bigger, but still the investment, what happens if you don't sell the 30,000? I mean, wow.
Well, as we know, you're in the publishing world, you once you've printed them, you're stuck with them.
Exactly. Right.
One.
Yeah.
Two, it did kind of make sense, because if you think about the traffic of Costco, it's a lot of people that I mean, let's face it, Costco on a Saturday afternoon, you're lucky to find a parking spot, right?
Right, that's true.
So yeah, but still, I was like, well, this is what their requirements are, and I say I can't find you a loophole around this,
Right.
And
yeah, that and yeah,
so
I mean,
for
the
a
other
small
thing though,
person, it just doesn't fit.
Right. Well, and that's it. So I've been invited to speak. A friend of mine, Ann Charles, writes the Deadwood series, and it's kind of about ghosts and zombies. It's a lot of fun, and every year she has a fan party in Deadwood, South Dakota. Like where Mount Rushmore is and stuff. And so I'm the featured author this year. And so she talked to me, and as a featured author, you get to bring bling, something to give away. And we first started talking about giving away books. But when I started looking at the cost of giving away books to everybody that came, it was tremendous, and she had an author come who was a traditionally published author whose publisher gave her the books because, the traditionally published, it's what, $1.50 to print paperbacks for them. Mm-hmm. But for the rest of us, if we're buying it, you're tripling or quadrupling the price there. And so, I got some other bling that I'm going to bring. But yeah, you're right. Those are the definite disadvantages of being independent, because unless you've got a huge nest egg, those big things are pretty much impossible to do.
Yeah. A friend of mine who has recently passed away. She is an author, and she also did a paranormal romance. When I was going through her stuff, I found what she would give away as a representative to her book, because she was an independent published person, and it's kind of the same thing that we hear Depictions Media give away to people. It was the cover of the book put onto a postcard.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So you definitely have the name of the book. You have the author because it's the front of the book. And again, getting back to, go ahead, hire the graphic artist and everything, the illustrator, to actually do your cover, because hey, there you go. You're at a book signing. It's like, or you're at a venue where you can't just give away books, but you can give away those, and then the person can go find the book later.
Yes, yes, that's perfect. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also, as an independent, and you probably have this come to your computer every day, there's like the BookBubs and the Kindle free reads and Book Doggy and all of those things that have just sprung up because of the independent ebook market. Mm-hmm. And basically, you pay them a certain amount of money, and they can accept you or reject you. So, for example, BookBug. I did some early BookBub advertising, and I think it cost about $800 to do a BookBub. And at first, it was amazing because it had 85,000 downloads. So it's like, whoa! If they bought the first one, and then you did see an uptick. So you saw that they got the first one free, and then you saw an uptick in the second one. So someone bought it, and kind of an uptick in the third, and maybe you lost them. You didn't see the uptick maybe by book 6 in the early days of BookBub. Mm-hmm. But now, I have found that people have become BookBub collectors. People have, 10,000, maybe not, that's probably a slight exaggeration, but they've got thousands of free books on their Kindle because they get a BookBub email every day, and they say, oh, this one's good and it's free. So they take it, but they never read them. And so you're paying $800 for people to collect your book, not read it. And so you don't get the residual sales from it. So it kind of seems that some of these places, because of the way the patterns people have with their Kindle reading, that you just might be put on a shelf, and it's not going to do you any good, maybe ever, but maybe not for years and years and years. You don't see, wasn't like in the first little while, first couple of years of BookBub, where you knew if you did it, you would see residual sales right after it. And now I get emails from people who say, your book has been on my Kindle for about 5 years, and I just decided to read it, and I really like it. And so that's another part of the marketing. You have to decide if it's worth it, if you're going to get residuals, and maybe you will, but it's going to be way down the road.
Yeah. Well, I do want to get at social media with this, because there's a couple of really cool questions I want to ask you before time runs out. So, because I actually found you, you were a suggested follow through Twitter. It said,
hey, nice. Okay.
You need to follow this person. And I opened it up and I was like, oh, she's a writer. Okay. I was like, oh, she writes paranormal books. Oh, she'd make a really cool interview. And I was like, so I started messaging you. It's like, and you happen to follow me back, which was also pretty cool too.
Right.
So when we were talking about marketing for authors, or should I should say for novelists, because authors sometimes are different category because they're like business experts or something, But for novelists, how has social media helped or hurt the marketing of your books?
I think it's really interesting. The first wonderful thing is that I have a relationship with my readers that I could have never imagined. And, I think I grew up reading Nora Roberts books, and I love Nora Roberts. I would have never thought to write to her. I would have never thought to have a conversation with her, or it just wasn't there. You read her books, you thought, oh, she's so great. And then, and then that was it. But I have readers who come back to me and they quote lines back and they say, oh, this was so funny, or this was so great. And even better than that, when I put a new book out, they share it on their social media, on their, Facebook page. And so you develop almost a brand loyalty, because if you put something out, they not only love your writing, but they love you. They've created this relationship with you. And so they're going to support you. So I think in that way, it's a wonderful, wonderful tool, especially for those of us who can't, when Nora Roberts, again, I'm going to pick on Nora a lot, but when Nora Roberts puts out a new book, her publishing company puts ads in women's magazines, and there's ads all over the place. And we can't afford that. As indies, we can't afford that. So social media is that advertising plane. I have found that Facebook is wonderful. That was the first one, and it's easiest for me because it's just conversation. And I'll tell a ghost story, or I'll find an actor who I think looks like one of my characters, and I'll put their picture, and I'll say, so what do you think? And there's all this conversation that goes around about it. Or just talk about, certain things. I obviously stay away from politics or religion or any of those things. But just kind of fun conversations. Now, I know authors who also will put out a question every day. For me personally, I don't like that. It seems like a forced conversation. They say, oh, I'm doing this. What's your favorite? Blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't ring true to me. But their readers seem to like it because they respond to it. Mm-hmm. So I guess, once again, be true to yourself. I love Twitter. As you said, that's where we met. And Twitter can be so much fun. And you can really show your personality there through memes and through quotes. And there just seems, in the writing community and maybe in the creative community, there's a lot of support. I kind of love that, where we're all retweeting people's stuff, and I think it's a great community. So, yeah, but with both of these, they're time consumers, and unless you watch, you've got a half a day sucked away by social media. So you need to limit, as an author, as a novelist, you should be spending your time writing, not reading about somebody's really cute puppy who just learned this really cute trick. You need to step away from the computer screen. And then Instagram is also great. And Instagram, I haven't spent a lot of time lately on Instagram, but I keep getting notifications of people who keep following me. Mm-hmm. And so I love that I'm not really paying as much attention as I should to it, but I'm still getting new followers. And so it's out there for people to see. And then Pinterest. you can put together, for me, I have some boards on Pinterest that are all about scary things or fall decorations or anything that kind of worked around my books. And I'll get followers on Pinterest. So it's all basic marketing. But I think it's integral to being an indie author that you get out there and you meet new people and you introduce yourself to them.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so we only got like a couple seconds left, and
okay.
So what is the best way for people to find you and join in the conversation with you and read the books?
On my Facebook page, which is, if they just look up Terri Reid, I know that they're going to find it. I'm clicking on it because it's awful. I have 2 Facebook pages, and one is, well, actually I have 3. I have a personal one. That's what I started with. But then I got so many people who weren't my family who were kind of going on my Facebook page that I had to do another. So I have Terri Reid Author. That is the best. So TerriReid, author. And that's the best way to find me. On Amazon, if you type in Terri Reid, I have an author page there, and that kind of gives you a little bit of a bio, but also lists all of my books. But those are 2, and Twitter, but I think for conversation, the best place is Facebook.
Okay. Because hey, you actually said this is like, while we may not think to email Stephen King or Nora Roberts, but Terri Reid is a real person to us, and why not?
Well, and
talk to you.
And you know, and it is. I've had people tell me, because when you write ghost stories, you're talking about death, and you're talking about afterlife. And I've had people talk to me about the death of a dear friend, and if I thought that they could, contact them again, or, I mean, some of the conversations, the emails make me cry. I mean, they're just so touching. And so, yeah, it's kind of an honor as, for me, to get these kind of emails and to get these messages, because without people who are willing to take a chance on indie authors, we wouldn't have a livelihood.
Yeah.
And so it behooves us to create those relationships with our readers.
Absolutely. I will say this much though, because you have modeled a, whether you knew it or not, you have modeled a really big author in England who wrote Harry Potter. Because
I love her.
You're freaky. J.K. Rowling, she has the Potter Evermore, I think it's called, as a website, where you can still find more Harry Potter stuff. And your Freaky Friday blog just kind of seems like that. It's more ghost stories, right?
Right.
and
yeah.
and you can actually have if you really were so inclined to hunt her down via social media, you really could have a personal conversation with her.
That is so great to know.
It's like, and that's really cool, right? So
yes. Wow.
Maybe not.
I didn't know that. That's impressive.
Yeah. Maybe not the Stephen Kings or the Nora Roberts, right. but J.K. Rowling's, believe it or not. And it was in the, let's see, I when I watch a movie, I watch all the way through to the end, and then I start reading the special features and watching all that stuff too. And it's like, and there it was, that she was actually answering back a fan in one of those. I was like, wow, impressive. So yeah, I
love that. And you know what? And it makes us love her more. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it just proves that whole social media respect and loyalty. When you take the time to acknowledge the people who are supporting you, they love you even more. Yes. So go J.K. Rowling.
Yeah,
I'm so impressed.
Yes. Well, our time has actually come to an end. We've hit our hour mark.
Okay.
It's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to connecting with you further and hearing more about your books and reading some of your books. So yeah.
Oh,
thank you
wonderful!
So much.
Thank you. This has just been delightful. Thank you so much too.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll tell everybody bye for now, and we will talk again next time.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.